Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in from. I'm Sunny.
And I'm Joe. Great to be back.
Welcome back to Sip and Talk. You know, I was scrolling through social media the other day, and it feels like that one particular phrase, that Taiwan has been part of China since ancient times slogan. It's become this background noise you just can't turn off.
It really has. It's like a song stuck on repeat. But what's interesting, and what I think we should get into today, is what isn't being said in those slogans.
What do you mean?
Well, whether it's state media or, those armies of online commenters, they almost always just say China. They very rarely, especially in that kind of emotional, high-pitched rhetoric, use the full official name, the People's Republic of China.
Huh. I never really focused on that, but you're right. It's always the general China.
And it's not because they're shy. It's because the moment you say that full name, the one that's only been around for about 75 years, you open up this juridical logic black hole so big that the entire argument just collapses into it.
A logic black hole. I love that. And that's exactly why we wanted to tackle this today. This isn't about emotion or taking political sides. We're going to try to be as rational as possible and really just deconstruct this whole succession theory and see where the logic holds up and, well, where it doesn't.
Let's do it. And maybe the best way to start is with a thought experiment for everyone listening.
Okay, let's set the stage.
Let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that their premise is 100% correct. That the PRC really did completely and totally inherit the Republic of China in 1949.
So like a total corporate takeover. The new management is in, the old one is out.
Exactly. If that were true, what would have been the immediate real-world consequences?
Well, I mean, if it's a real takeover, all the old company's paperwork becomes obsolete, right? The assets, the debts, everything legally transfers.
Precisely. So every single ROC passport held by anyone, anywhere in the world, should have instantly become invalid, worthless.
And all the territory the ROC controlled, Taiwan, Penghu, Kinmen, Matsu, it all should have just seamlessly, legally become part of the PRC's domain.
There should have been no gap, no conflict over governance, a clean legal transfer of power. But of course, the reality check is pretty stark.
Stark is an understatement. The old company didn't close its doors. It basically just moved its headquarters, renovated the place, issued new stock in the form of democratization, and then became like an indispensable leader in a critical global industry.
It's the opposite of a vanished entity. And that fundamental tension between the legal claim and the on-the-ground reality is what forces this entire language strategy. It all starts with the words they choose.
The magic of language. Okay, let's break that down. You said they use China as a kind of psychological tool. What's the power in that one word?
Well, think about what the word China brings to mind for most people. It's not a political party. It's 5,000 years of history.
It's the Great Wall, it's poetry, the Yellow River, classical literature.
Right. It's culture, it's civilization.
Yeah.
So when the CCP says Taiwan is part of China, they're trying to perform this end run around modern politics. They're appealing directly to cultural identity.
They're trying to make it sound like if you disagree with their political claim, you're somehow rejecting your own heritage.
It weaponizes the idea of the nation.
Yeah.
China becomes this big, amorphous, emotional shell.
Okay, so China is the shell. What's inside?
Inside is the political bone, the People's Republic of China. And that's not an ancient concept. It's a very specific political entity founded on a very specific date, October 1st, 1949.
And that's where the vulnerability is, right? Because if you say Taiwan is an inseparable part of the People's Republic of China,
your brain, anyone's brain, immediately starts a rational time check. It's almost automatic.
you start asking questions.
You have to. You think, okay, the PRC, 1949. So where was the PRC in 1895 when Taiwan was ceded to Japan?
It didn't exist.
Where was it in 1945 when the ROC took over administration?
Didn't exist.
And maybe most importantly, where was the PRC in 1996 when Taiwan held its first free, direct presidential election? Has the PRC's law ever actually governed that island? Have they ever collected $1 in taxes there?
The answer is obviously no. So by forcing that 1949 start date into the conversation, the whole since ancient times trump card it gets invalidated on the spot.
Instantly. The PRC, the political entity, does not exist since ancient times. So they have to hide under the big cultural umbrella of China.
Because the moment you name the political entity, the argument gets locked into the messy reality of post-World War II international law.
Exactly. Their standard line is always the vague one.
Huh.
Taiwan is an inseparable part of China.
But the very specific legally binding statement, Taiwan is an inseparable part of the People's Republic of China? That's the one you almost never see in their day-to-day propaganda.
Because it forces them to confront the one single iron fact they cannot get around. The People's Republic of China has never, not for 1 second since its founding, exercised effective sovereignty or governance over a single inch of Taiwanese territory. And that distinction between the cultural shell and the political bone is the key to decoding everything they say on the international stage.
Okay, but let's do a little fact check here, because I can hear people thinking it. Is it true that they never use the full name? That seems like a bit of an overstatement.
It is. And that's a really important correction we need to make. There's this popular idea online that PRC officials are literally afraid to say the full name because they know it causes this logic collapse.
And that's a bit too simple, I'm guessing. It's an emotionally satisfying idea, but it's probably not accurate.
It's an overinterpretation. We have to draw a clear line between what's effective for propaganda and what's necessary for legal enforcement.
Okay, so two different goals, two different language strategies.
Exactly. For propaganda, for a headline, for a rally, you want maximum emotional impact with the fewest words. China does that perfectly. It sells the great unity story.
But for a law or a treaty, you need absolute precision.
You have to. If they passed a law that just said China, a lawyer could argue, well, which China? The Republic of China still exists and calls itself that. It would be legally ambiguous. To anchor their claim to their regime, to the CCP, the full name is mandatory.
So where do we see them using it? Where's the hard evidence?
You start at the very top. The Constitution of the PRC. In the preamble, the guiding legal statement of the entire country, it states black and white that Taiwan is an inseparable part of the sacred territory of the People's Republic of China.
Well, you can't really claim you're afraid to use a name that's in the preamble to your own constitution.
Then you look at the laws they've written specifically for this issue. The Anti-Secession Law from 2005. Article 2 of that law explicitly links Taiwan's status to the authority of the PRC government. It's all there in formal, legal language.
What about their big policy statements to the world?
The Taiwan White Papers. They've put them out periodically, 1993, 2000, and again in 2022. And they all follow the same pattern. They start with a soft cultural claim. Taiwan is part of China.
And
then, a few sentences later, they lock it down with a political claim. And the government, the People's Republic of China, is the sole legitimate government representing all of China. They use both terms strategically.
So to be clear, their fear isn't that people hear the full name.
No. Their fear is that the world fails to connect the two. Their whole strategy is to fuse the cultural concept of China with the political entity of the PRC until people see them as one and the same. They just pick whichever term works best for the situation, cultural appeal or legal assertion.
So the idea that they're too scared is, it's a nice thought for their opponents, but it's a misunderstanding of a much more sophisticated legal and rhetorical game they're playing.
It is. They're using ambiguity itself as a weapon.
Okay, that brings us right to the heart of it, the actual legal battleground. And you've said this all comes down to the difference between succession of states and succession of governments. Before we get into the weeds, can you just break down what that distinction actually means in international law?
Yeah, this is absolutely crucial. And let's use a simple analogy. Succession of governments is like a company getting a new CEO.
Okay, so the leadership changes, maybe the board changes.
Right. But the company itself, its legal name, its assets, its contracts, its history, that all remains intact. The United States has had, 46 different governments? But the state of the United States has continued uninterrupted since the 1780s. The underlying legal entity is the same.
So the management team changes, but the corporation is continuous.
Perfect analogy. Now, succession of states is totally different. That's like the company going bankrupt, dissolving, and maybe splitting into 5 new, smaller companies.
A complete liquidation.
A complete legal liquidation. The old entity's legal personality vanishes. Think about the Soviet Union in 1991. It ceased to exist. 15 new independent states emerged. They were brand new legal entities in the eyes of the world.
That makes perfect sense. So with that framework, the PRC's entire argument is based on it being a succession of
governments. They argued that China, the state, the legal entity, never disappear. They just had a civil war, and in 1949, the management changed. The Communist Party took over the mainland.
A management takeover.
That's their core logic. And if you accept that, then their conclusion follows naturally. The PRC inherited all the assets and claims of the continuous Chinese state, which, in their view, includes Taiwan.
And their big piece of international evidence for this is UN Resolution 2758 from 1971.
Right. They interpret that resolution as the world officially recognizing them as the one and only legitimate government of the continuing state of China.
Okay, so that's their case. What's the counter-argument from the ROC's perspective, the regime continuation theory?
Their argument is pretty straightforward. They say, wait a minute, for a succession to happen, the old entity has to be gone. But we're not gone.
We're still here.
We're still here. We lost the mainland, yes, but the government relocated to Taiwan. We still have a defined territory. We have a population. We have a functioning government that passes laws and collects taxes. And we have the capacity to engage in foreign relations.
And that's where the Montevideo Convention comes in, right? The famous checklist for what makes a state a state.
The 1933 Montevideo Convention. It's the widely accepted standard. And the ROC argues that it clearly meets all four criteria: people, territory, government, and capacity to enter into relations with other states.
So their argument is, since the old company is still in business and fully operational, the legal condition for succession just doesn't exist. You can't inherit from someone who isn't dead.
That's the core of the dispute. And this is where we can really hit the PRC's claim with what I call the logical hard knocks. There are three huge flaws in their succession argument.
All right, let's hear them. Flaw number one.
Flaw #1. The legal entity has not vanished. As we just said, international law generally requires the old state to completely collapse, to be gone, like Yugoslavia in the 1990s.
Right, it fragmented into a bunch of new countries.
Exactly. The Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia ceased to exist. It was legally liquidated. The ROC never was. It just moved. It maintained its constitution, its government. It even held China's seat at the UN for over 20 years after 1949.
So the PRC is trying to claim it inherited an entity that is not only still alive, but is, a top 20 global economy.
Which leads to that analogy we talked about. It's like you claiming you've legally inherited your neighbor's house, their car, their bank account, while your neighbor is still living there, watering their plants on the balcony and hosting dinner parties.
That's not an inheritance. That's just attempted squatting.
It's an attempt to enforce a historical claim against the reality of effective, on-the-ground control.
Okay, ready for flaw number two.
Lay it on me. Flaw #2. The San Francisco Peace Treaty disconnect. This one gets a little technical, but it's so important. It's about the legal status of Taiwan itself after World War II.
This is the treaty from 1951 that officially ended the war with Japan.
Correct. And in Article 2 of that treaty, it says that Japan renounces all right, title, and claim to Taiwan and the pescadores.
It gives them up.
It gives them up. But, and this is the billion-dollar question, it never says who it gives them up to.
It just says Japan abandons sovereignty. It leaves the final status blank.
It leaves it blank. Now think about the implication of that. The ROC administered Taiwan from 1945, but if Japan didn't formally transfer sovereignty until 1951 and then just abandoned it,
then you could argue the ROC never had full undisputed sovereignty in the first place. They were just an administrative power.
And if the ROC never definitively owned the asset, how could the PRC, which was founded in 1949, inherit an asset that its predecessor may have never legally possessed?
Whoa. So the PRC is claiming to inherit something from the ROC that the ROC itself had a legally ambiguous claim to.
It's a claim built on top of another claim, both of which are shaky.
Yeah.
It just piles legal uncertainty on top of legal uncertainty. And that ambiguity is precisely why many Western countries, including the U.S., officially hold the position that Taiwan's status is undetermined.
Okay, that makes so much sense now. What's the third flaw?
Flaw #3. Democratic transformation is legal reconstruction. This one is, I think, the most powerful, but also the most overlooked. It's all about what happened in Taiwan in the 1990s.
The move to democracy. Direct elections for the president, the legislature.
Yes. That transition fundamentally changed the source of the government's legitimacy.
How so? How does democracy legally defeat a historical claim of succession?
Because before the 1990s, the ROC government's claim to rule Taiwan was based on, historical documents, on the idea that they were the government of all of China that had retreated there.
It was based on the Chinese Civil War.
Exactly. But after democratization, the government's legitimacy no longer comes from a 1947 constitution written in Nanjing. It comes directly from the people living on the island. Sovereignty now very clearly resides in the people of Taiwan, who express their will through regular free elections.
Ah, So the legal and political foundation of the state was essentially rebuilt from the ground up based on democratic consent.
It was a political rebirth. So the PRC's 1949 succession theory is an attempt to inherit an old authoritarian legal framework that doesn't even exist anymore in Taiwan. The entity they claim to succeed has transformed itself into something completely new.
It makes their argument look like a useless antique when you place it next to modern democratic principles.
That's a great way to put it. It just doesn't apply to the reality of 21st century Taiwan.
Wow. Okay, so with all those flaws in the theory, let's talk about the reality of how this plays out today. This is what you call legal warfare.
It is. The PRC is constantly pushing slogans and interpretations to try and solidify its claims in the international community.
And the big one you mentioned is UN Resolution 2758. The slogan is basically, the UN decided Taiwan's status back in 1971.
And that is a powerful but fundamentally incorrect talking point. If you actually read the text of the resolution, it's very clear. It's about representation. It's about who gets to sit in China's seat at the UN.
It was a fight between Beijing and Taipei over who was the legitimate government of China.
Right. It kicks out the representatives of Chiang Kai-shek and brings in the representatives of the PRC. There is not a single word in that resolution that discusses, let alone determines, the political sovereignty of Taiwan.
It decides who sits in the chair, not who owns the land.
That's the perfect summary. And because the PRC has been so aggressive in pushing their interpretation, using it to try and block Taiwan from, say, the World Health Organization, that's why you've seen the U.S. State Department and other countries recently start issuing these very public clarifications.
Pushing back and saying, hold on, that's not what the resolution says.
They have to. They're restating for the record that the resolution is about representation, not sovereignty, and that their official position remains that Taiwan's status is undetermined. It's a defensive legal move.
And what about the other slogan, the broader one? The PRC inherited everything from the ROC.
Well, the loophole there is the one we've been talking about this whole time. The ROC still exists. It meets the Montevideo criteria. You simply cannot legally inherit something that hasn't vanished.
And that's the foundation of that strategic ambiguity policy we hear so much about. It's all built on these legal loopholes.
It is. It's built on the ambiguity left in the San Francisco Peace Treaty. And that ambiguity, that uncertainty, is incredibly useful geopolitically.
How so? Why not just take a clear stance and end the debate?
Because ambiguity gives you flexibility. Think back to the 1970s. The U.S. needed to open relations with the PRC to counter the Soviet Union. The ambiguity over Taiwan's status made that possible.
It let them engage with Beijing without formally abandoning Taipei.
Exactly. And now, fast forward to today. There's this intense tech and strategic rivalry. The ambiguity allows the U.S. to support Taiwan's defense, to deepen ties, all without crossing Beijing's ultimate red line, which would be formal diplomatic recognition of Taiwan as a sovereign state.
It's a geopolitical safety valve.
It is. And it shows how international law is often not a rigid set of rules, but a framework that powerful nations interpret to suit their political needs.
And we have to recognize that for both sides, this is an almost existential issue. For the PRC, why is it so absolutely critical for them to cling to this succession theory?
Because admitting the ROC still exists as a legitimate functioning state is a fatal blow to the CCP's entire political narrative.
It would mean acknowledging two Chinas, or one China, one Taiwan.
Which would undermine their claim to be the sole legitimate successor to the pre-1949 government. Their entire story of reunification is based on the premise that the Civil War is over and they won, completely and totally. Admitting the other side is still around and thriving destroys that narrative.
And for Taiwan, obviously, accepting the PRC's theory is just as impossible.
It would be political suicide. It means agreeing that you are nothing more than the remnant of a vanished regime, a ghost. And that is completely incompatible with being a modern democracy where the people believe they are sovereign.
And that's where that new terminology we see coming from Taiwan, Republic of China, Taiwan, comes from. It's a very deliberate linguistic strategy, isn't it?
Incredibly deliberate.
Yeah.
And very clever. It's an attempt to weave together two ideas, the historical continuity and constitutional basis of the Republic of China with the modern, democratic, geographic reality of Taiwan.
It's trying to update the brand, so to speak.
It's an attempt to redefine their identity based on the sovereign will of the people living there now, rather than solely on the outcome of a civil war from 75 years ago.
So when you boil it all down, understanding the flaws in the succession theory is the key to seeing through the fog of all the political rhetoric and the legal warfare.
It is. Once you understand the architecture of the argument, you can see all the structural weaknesses.
Well, this has been an incredibly thorough breakdown. We've gone from a simple slogan all the way down to the foundations of international law.
And I think it's important to say our goal here has never been to stir up conflict or even to take a side. It's about giving you, the listener, the tools to think critically for yourself.
And the big takeaway for me is just clarity. If you can clearly separate cultural China, that big, emotional 5,000-year-old shell, from the specific political regime of the PRC, the 75-year-old rational bone,
And then separate both of those from the very specific, and as we've discussed, very flawed legal concept of state succession.
then the propaganda, the slogans, they just kind of lose their power over you.
Right, and you can see their strategy clearly. They use China for cultural appeal, and they use the People's Republic of China when they need to make a hard legal claim. They switch back and forth depending on the audience and the goal.
So as a final provocative thought to leave everyone with, I keep coming back to this idea. While all these laws are written and debated and argued over in international forums...
Lawyers get rich.
Right. But the actual messy day-to-day facts of governance, collecting taxes, running schools, issuing passports, holding free elections, that stuff happens every single day.
That governance fact is a powerful reality, and it's constantly clashing with this abstract, historical, juridical claim. At the end of the day, which reality do you think is more compelling to the world in the long run? That's the question to ponder.
And we just want to be crystal clear. Our analysis today is meant to be objective. It's based on facts, on international law, and different geopolitical perspectives. It's not a criticism or endorsement of any nation, any group, or any people. Our only goal is to encourage continued critical and independent thinking.
Hopefully this gives you the tools to ask much more specific questions the next time you hear those slogans start to play.
Thank you all so much for joining us here on Sip&Talk. Please make sure you subscribe so you never miss one of our discussions on these complex global topics.
And before you go, do us a favor.
Oh, yeah. Check out our good friend Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickey to Life. He does fantastic travel vlogs and some really fun memes.
And get this, I heard he's actually taking media courses to up his editing game for his vlogs. The guy is dedicated.
He really is. His channel has been around for 3 years now. He's an old pro compared to us. Haha. So please, go give his videos a watch.
You won't regret it.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.